We have some panelists join on stage as well. Speakers got a chance to introduce themselves. Can panelists that just joined please introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name is Thomas Lovis. I'm the product manager at GE Digital for our APM reliability and smart signal software.
Brian Flett from Bentley Systems, also in the product management, responsible for asset performance management and our digital twin solutions.
Hemant Pandit, I work for Honeywell in Houston office. I'm a senior director, and my passion is operationalizing digitization for my clients. Thank you, ARC, for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to a discussion here.
So we can, if audience members have any questions, they can raise your hand, and my colleague Dan would go to them. And can you please turn that on?
How about now?
Yeah.
Mike Richards, J&J, thank you for your presentation. I have, I guess, one question. I saw a lot of successes, and one of the challenges that I think I face is that interfaces with other systems. I think, Malik, you showed that would be one of the biggest challenges. Nicholas, you had shown some connections to CMS, MMS systems. How do you overcome those challenges? I mean, I know we need leadership support, but in a siloed organization or one department's goals and objectives may not be aligned with others. How do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's a big problem, and the way we are doing it is really kind of taking a top-down view. So I think a lot of people talk about the Purdue model, but like in ISA stack and what are the interfaces that are really required, right, from our end-to-end solution. So whether you're going from if you're trying to solve an agile fulfill operations problem or a B2B problem, or if you want to connect I talked about the one automation for contractor management, for instance, right? Contract to pay. You're talking about a lot of different things that you need to integrate. So once you identify that, you have to work. We have been working with the appropriate functional leadership, right, at the top level. Say, hey, this is important. We need to do it. We need commitments for the data. I talked about the data hub, because a lot of cleansing is required to put the data in the right place. And then our tech centers define the appropriate technology. So I think we talked about the fact that you define the business problem first, get a buy-in, and then have the technology in place to say, how do you integrate it? In our case, we are a 125-year-old company. We have a lot of point-to-point interfaces where applicable. We are using the service bus and that kind of technology, right, to make the interfaces to work seamlessly. But it's really critical. I would say leadership, commitment, get the data in the right place, make sure that you have the ownership of the data objects defined as to who's going to maintain that. And then the technology piece is really the most simplest things to solve ultimately, because it's available right now.
So I'll speak to that a little bit too. And ours is a little bit different because we're not necessarily talking about, making sure that everybody's data is together, but it was more about getting different sandboxes to play together nicely. And when you own a particular sandbox, in our example, our CMMS system, the owners of that particular area, that silo, a lot of times they don't want anybody else playing in their area. And so it becomes about what the value is for them, for you to be able to integrate with their system. And that was the challenge for us, is how do we identify what kind of value you're going to get out of operators taking routes out in the plant, putting in information, and then pushing it into your CMMS and working through that work management process at our site. And it really became about identifying what the value was at each step and being able to properly communicate that to those various groups that you had to interface with, and making it something that they go, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. We'd like to reduce duplicate work orders, and that would help us manage our backlog. And that was where we had those good conversations with the various departments. For example, our planning and scheduling department, we had to interface with them to be able to use our tablet-based operator rounds to push those work orders. And we had to explain to them, why is this important to you, and why would you want to allow us to make that interface. And so it was more of a people connection for us than anything else. And it worked out pretty well. And we have more things planned to try to interface with more groups and get more of that data into a centralized location.
Yeah, I think from a vendor perspective, we certainly heard the message in the keynote this morning, and I think as vendors, we can all agree, the days of a single vendor and a single solution from one vendor are over. I think we all know that. And we're very much working together to try and create standards, to create interoperability, to make sure that our systems can talk to each other. So certainly the message is heard, and we're working toward that.
Yeah, I think I'll also give a different perspective. Yes, I think from a technology perspective, we had to make sure our technologies integrate. That gets into API connectivity, so on and so forth. But I think the other, maybe sometimes bigger challenge is once you really integrate, how do you use that information? So when I think Preet put out the first challenge that talked about integration of systems, I think the bigger challenge coming up is going to be, do you have the organizational structure, the processes to make use of that? And that gets into the whole technology adoption and so on. So I look at integration from those two perspectives, the technology piece and the actual deployment piece of it.
And one other thing I would say is, about the type of data that you're using and making sure you have the right data at the right time, with the right information coming from it too, whether it's historian, CMMS, and making sure that, your asset information is being brought over and talking with each other. That's, another really important piece that we gotta make sure that it's set up correctly.
Yeah, and I would quickly like to add as well that we know this is a known problem. All end users always appear as the biggest challenge, and we constantly know that technology providers are working on that. And in our future, it's going to become even more critical, because when we are talking about connected worker technologies, when we want to use augmented reality, we want to make sure that if we are talking about augmented reality, when somebody is wearing a heads-up display or a smart camera, they want to have the right data at right time. So everything needs to be integrated with one another if we want to make the connected worker a reality. Any other question?
You first.
Hey, good morning. Great presentation. Mark Susich with Emerson. My question's directed toward Nicholas, but I welcome feedback from everybody up there. During the presentation, anomaly and defect were interchanged. And I'm curious, could you elaborate on your workflow when anomaly truly becomes an actual anomaly and meets the definition of a defect? Do you have, defined criteria and algorithms that are flagging that so it's automated going to your CMS? Or are SMEs looking at that data, making a decision based on plant equipment behavior, or a hybrid model?
So we don't have anything as sophisticated as any type of analysis that automatically determines whether it has changed from an anomaly to a defect. However, we've set up our indicators and states to identify varying different levels of criticality for the indicators that you put into place. And in certain cases where it would require somebody to maybe look at it closer to really determine what's happening, we use the immediate email notifications. It'll go to people like our lubrication specialists, our vibration techs, our mechanical integrity inspectors, or our process engineering group. And it'll flag those things as either something that they need to go take a look at sooner, or something that they need to look at closer to identify that. So I think our digital transformation journey is kind of at the beginning stages of what we would like to accomplish with it. So things like machine learning and AI, those are in our future, but we're not quite there yet.
Do you mind if I complement a little bit this answer? I understand your question because finally, we started this remote monitoring things with data management and stuff about 10 years ago. Myself, I was working as in charge of maintenance on a remote platform in Myanmar, 12,000 kilometers from Paris, actually. And I first received an alert. so an anomaly. And I say, what the hell have they seen in Paris that I haven't seen myself from 100 meters? And it was actually the delta P around across filters that was rising. So it was true. So when now I'm working on the other side of the barrier, I know that some sites receive the anomaly, generally discard the anomaly, and then they get to the failure. They do it twice, sometimes 3 times, and after a shutdown of a couple of months when they have to justify why they have discarded the alerts from the headquarters, they never do it a 4th time. So we generally, years ago, regularly reach the level of failure, but less and less right now. Thankfully, mind changed and the data is more and more accepted, because before it was more than a big brother thing, you know. But now things have changed, at least from our point of view between operation and headquarters.
Maybe just to complement what is different is that it's SME who are doing that kind of analysis inside. So people are talking with people, and most of them, as Matthias said, they've been at their position before. So they know what their daily job, they know they have their day-to-day activity, so they are not looking after all the data and all the threshold. So when they see an alert, they raise the case, they provide some recommendation, but it's not an automated, I would say, recognition pattern. It's SME who we rely on people for that.
That's why we need to be friends with everyone, not only with us.
Agreed.
Okay, yeah. Sami Koskinen with BMAX. First, thank you for great presentations. I think I have just a practical question. You all want to digitalize your data and to be able to then maintain your operation, you probably use a service providers for your plant maintenance, right? Do you allow them to access your systems and provide the data directly to your systems, or how do you manage your service providers?
Yeah, I can answer at least partially to this question. We are happy with the Smart Signal because with this software, we have access to everything. It's not a black box. I mean, the software is provided, the algorithm is working on its side, but the data is within Total Energies on premises. So far, we are reluctant to have this data on the clouds and share this operational data. All the operational data from the oil and gas producer and all energies or any company is the asset of the company. If we lose this data, we lose partially a lot of our history and the way we operate. We don't want this to happen. So the data is on our servers. And with the Smart Signal and Sentinel Suite, at least we have access. We manage the users, we manage the data, we can erase whatever we want, we can customize the history we want to keep into the servers. So the data remains within our server. Even if the server may be managed by Amazon or whatever other, let's say, data center management. But the data itself and the content of the data, which is used by the software, is still ours. And the philosophy today of Total Energy is to have this data internally on our servers, and we are still reluctant to have those data on clouds. Even if we are definitely, we trust our providers that this data won't leak anywhere, but who knows?
And as well with the Smart Signal, this software is used at headquarters, but the access is granted for everyone everywhere. And with regards to maintenance contracts, the site or affiliate, they are managing their contract themselves. So they are using the data and they are liaising with the contract on site because all affiliates have different contracts or methods or strategy with regards to maintenance. So they're using it, and thereafter they launch work orders or with directly their contracts.
Anybody else would like to add anything? Related question to technology providers. Again, we talk about security and data safety, how secure is our data, as Matthias and Alex said, they are not that comfortable yet to putting on their data on cloud, and theirs is on-prem. Do you see that issue coming up do you hear the same issue from other end users? Do you see preference changing?
Yeah, so definitely we see different approaches in different industries, and we definitely see change. So there's no question from a vendor perspective, we can develop much more quickly. We can get changes out there much more quickly if everything is cloud-based, and more and more requirements are coming to collaborate between the owners of the asset and their maintenance providers and the various other service providers. So there's a whole bunch of efficiencies that can come from the cloud approach, but obviously there's a bunch of risks as well. And so often we see kind of a hybrid cloud approach where certain information that the organizations are comfortable sharing may be cloud-based and may be accessible across multiple organizations. Well, other pieces of information that may be more, where security is more of a concern, may be maintained on premises, and you have this hybrid model, and that seems to be where we're seeing the industry going. I don't know what your experience is.
And I say also, based on the country that you're working in as well too, government regulations as well, some of them will not allow data outside the country. And if you don't have a point of presence, with AWS or Azure and stuff like that, then you really have to stay with the on-premise deployment option. But, we've seen a lot more on the power generation side, moving towards cloud information and having it hosted by our providers as well too. But on the oil and gas, some of them are transitioning to there, mining, aviation, all different customers that work with. It really depends on government regulations, the countries that they're in, plus, where they are in their data journey.
Yeah, I guess just to add to what you just said, I think in our case, what we see is we do have clients who are where we host these, especially APM type solution on the cloud. But you also have to respect some of the region-specific data privacy type rules and guidelines. So we do have regional solutions in that case. So I think from a technology perspective, we see that being a trend, but cautious. I think customers, and I think on the legality side of things, you just go through a whole bunch of discussions on ownership of data, IP, and so on. So you just have to walk through those spaces. Yeah.
Do we have more questions in the audience?
Hi, Rafael, ARC Advisory Group. This is the examples that Total Energy showed of the catches appeared mostly to be a step function increase in some parameter versus a very gradual increase. Did you have any catches that were of a gradual nature? And just general for the speakers, are there different approaches needed, step function versus gradual?
Actually, we have a lot of examples, a lot, but we had only 15 minutes to present. Yeah, we have a lot of gradual. We have examples where we are able to monitor some deviation lasting for at least a year with very slow degradation, slow but sure. Example would be degradation of a dry gas seal on centrifugal compressor, where you can see deviation of primary vent pressure, which is measured in millibar, so should be PSI, I guess, very slowly, but we know that the machine is degrading. We know it perfectly. We have example of which are a little bit less fancy, I would say, hydraulic oil filters, delta P, increasing as well. This is typically slow increase, but which obviously lead to some problem. But technically speaking, on the machine, there is no emergency shutdown coming from this delta P, for example, so there is nothing to worry about very quickly. Vibration issues sometimes occurred very quickly. We were able to catch this one before trip happens, luckily, within a few hours. So we have a lot of examples of slow degradation. But I selected those examples because generally with the step increase, we remain below the alert level or the shutdown level of the machine, even below the alarm level. So it means that the operator is not aware that there is a step increase. And the step increase generally is not looking very critical. That's why I chose this example from my catch library, I would say. But we have a lot of other examples. We had, because of course we are, let's say, our objective is to have less and less failures. So we had in the past a lot of example, and the number of example is getting lower because our operational are getting even better.
We have more questions in the audience.
If I could, just tapping in on that. So we don't use the step change increase as the monitor, like, in the seconds, minutes, time window. We're looking more for hours, days, and weeks with the APM solution. And we definitely have seen gradual rises, for sure.
So, curious, you guys have talked a lot about the technology aspects. If you think about the people and process side, I wonder if you could touch a little bit. I think to all the examples, you got the 30-year operators who just know how stuff works, right? And that adoption piece, just curious across the team, how has that worked? What kind of adoption have you gotten, especially from those more experienced personnel?
Yeah.
I'll go on that one. So that was one of the things that getting adoption of, especially, you're handing a guy that's been in the plant for 40 years, you're handing him a tablet. And he goes, well, why would I use this? I have my notebook. And that was a very, for some people, it was a very difficult transition to move to that tablet. But what we found was that by going out and talking to them, and we spent a lot of time out in the operating units with each crew, going through, showing them what the device was, what it did. And what we did is we adopted the things that they were doing on a day-to-day basis. So we didn't completely flip the script on your 40-year operator. He was looking at the same things. He was just using a different tool to collect it. And we found by spending the time and being available and being out there with the operators and maintainers that were taking those checks, we had a lot better uptake on the technology that we were putting out there. Sold benefits to the guys in the field, how much more efficient it was, actually showing them how to generate a work order and how fast it was, that they didn't have to log into the CMMS. They didn't have to type what the equipment was or find the functional locations for these pieces of equipment. And it was selling those benefits to those operators that was able to increase the uptake. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certain operators out there that never really took to it and don't know that they ever will. But these are the same guys that they don't even like logging into the computer to get their email. And so it was something that we had to recognize and make sure that their supervisor was important to their supervisor. And it, just like I believe the last presentation showed, it goes down that chain. So if it's important to the supervisor, it's important to the people that work with them. So that's how we did it.
Can I add a story to complement that? I assume by long competence, you mean probably a generation issue. But one supervisor, mechanical supervisor, was working on a platform, a couple of diesel generator and 3 pumps. So he told us, I don't give a peanut for your smart signal things. But he get promoted and he landed on an FPSO, which means a large productional platform. And he get on the shoulder 3 turbo generators, 2 turbo compressors, 2 electro compressors, 3 water injection pump, 4 crude oil export pump, and another dozen of equipment. So he ended up with 130 equipment. And the months after, I had a call asking for deployment of those equipment into the monitoring center. So adoption may change depending on condition, but generally, it is a matter of as well of quantity of job. So sometimes it's hard, it's right, but generally it's okay. After a few years, it's okay.
I think I was going to say, I think it's the most difficult part of the digital journey, the adaption part. So I think I'd break it down into worrying about, scaling, upscaling, reskilling, the examples that Nicholas gave. You have the users who are expecting the younger, if you will, the tech savvy, digital savvy users who expect to have the device in their hand. But pretty large majority of our user base, is kind of wondering like, why are you asking me to change the way I've been working for all these years, okay? And then you have a smaller portion of the people like don't want to do it because that's just the way it is. So I think the training, awareness, in yours, Mark, you talked about the leadership, like the leadership site needs to own that and drive the adoption, messaging. It's not the IT systems and the people who developed it, right? And make sure that they have the tools that are needed, they're trained, retrained, and then the awareness, you're constantly driving that messaging. Otherwise, there is no value case to be, I always say there's no value case to be gained, if you implement it, but it doesn't get used, that's expected.
But sometimes we just need the general manager to say, you do it and that's all. I think that's one of your tips, right? We talk about adoption and things, this approach is okay, but once it is not working, we just need the manager, generally with one email saying you have to get to it, and afterwards we get the adoption right away.
The reason the leadership's so important is you will encounter resistance, and having a constancy of purpose that says, no, this is the way we want to go, we want to do it, it changes the game entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So just, it helps a lot. And then patience.
Yeah, and I would say the step after is showing them that you will not steal their job. They will still be useful, and you are not telling them you're not performing well. It's just an additional support. We are looking after what you can't see because you are in your day-to-day operations.
So with that, it's time to wrap up the discussion. I know we have some pending questions. Get a hold of these guys when they get off stage. But I really want to thank all the speakers, all the panelists. Great discussion. Thank you so much.